All right. Welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and tonight, I had some time to see if we could try and get a discussion going. I might change the format a little bit this time. Instead of having just a general open room, I might just take people one on one and see if that works a little better. I don't know. I'm just going to kind of be flexible with it. Of course, assuming that there are people who want to join and all that. But I kind of want to see if I can get something a little more focused with some people. If there's anyone who wants to chat with me, see if we can get something a little more productive. Because with the open rooms, we get more participation, but also there is a great deal more chaos, and it's hard to kind of nail things down and come to a conclusion on any single topic. So maybe I might try. I've seen some people who do like one-on-one conversations, and obviously, if people do appear and start watching this, they're also free to participate from the chat and ask questions if they want to do that. It's going to depend on how people want to go about it, but I'm going to kind of try that way instead of just saying anyone can come in. Just kind of try to limit it and see if we can have some conversations that actually lead somewhere and reach a resolution. But we'll see what happens. Things I would like to talk about, just generally. Again, if someone wants to join, maybe they've heard some things I've said, they want to talk about it. But generally, the topics for this channel, the existence of God, Christian doctrine, salvation, which is called soteriology, Christology, the nature of Christ, usually deals with things like the Trinity, or other viewpoints include oneness, modalism, and my viewpoint, which is Unitarianism, which I think far and away makes the most sense and is the most historical and is based on what Jesus Christ taught, which is basically the idea that, there's God exists, and Jesus Christ is a human just like we are, and who was a servant of God and was therefore anointed by God to speak revelation from God. We can talk about the Bible. We can talk about the canon. There was recently a debate I watched about the canon, and some people were arguing that the apocryphal texts, or several of them, should be included as part of Scripture. I don't know. I guess like the whole idea of Scripture, I'm just not sure it ever was supposed to be the absolute primary foundation of Christian doctrine. And the thing is, you can't know what happened in history without somebody having recorded it. So the function of Scripture is to tell us what happened in history. But it's meant to be a tool that is used to understand that aspect. And I think in Christianity has been elevated to something way more than it was ever intended to be. The idea that it is basically a divine text that is not subject to being questioned, analyzed, investigated to see if it corresponds to some sort of external reality. And to me, the Christian scriptures are important, but I only look at them insofar as they help me see what is true. Okay, so truth can be found in the Bible, but also it can be found in a lot of other places as well. So to me, truth is the ultimate basis of doctrine. And the reason I look at Scripture is to learn about what was said in the past and what was done in the past. So the truth itself lies beyond the words themselves. And that's why trying to establish absolute truth from the text, it can be done. I'm not saying it's impossible. At the same time, there's always that aspect of the question, like, is this being interpreted correctly? Was it recorded correctly? Are these word-for-word transcripts of conversations from thousands of years ago? these kinds of questions arise in my mind. So basically, the scripture helps me, and I find them reliable enough that I can put my faith in them. But I don't go so far as to say that what I believe is absolutely proven by scripture. Now, for what I believe to be true, it must correspond to reality itself, which is words in a book will never be reality. They can only reflect or point to some reality beyond themselves. So my basis of truth is always going to be what is real or what was real. Okay, so what actually happened in history? What was actually said? And then do those things that were said actually correspond to truth itself, which is beyond the words? But a lot of Christians are taught that the words themselves are the truth. But we know that can't be the case because everyone's just interpreting the words differently. So it comes down to interpretation. But reality is not for interpretation. It's not, you see these different viewpoints, people talking about salvation. Okay. Well, I interpret it this way, the other person interprets it that way. Well, somebody's wrong. And it's not about your interpretation of what you believe or what you think. One of those people or both of them are wrong. Okay. And it's not based on what the words are. It's not based on anyone's interpretation. It's based on the truth that may or may not correspond to what those words are saying. And this is important because a lot of people think they can get assurance from words in a book, but they really can't. They really can't. They can derive truth from words in a book, but it's only because the book or the words pointed to them to some truth. It's not because the words themselves are true. And this really bothers me when I see Christians discoursing with one another. They think the words themselves are the truth, but they're not. Absolutely not. God's word is true, but God's word is synonymous with the universe and revelation and reality itself. So the true word of God is the universe. That's why science is actually the ultimate religion. It's because science is based on observation of what's true. But the problem is, it's not a religion in the conventional sense. It's not something that you take on faith. It's something that you actually observe and confer with direct experience. So that's the ultimate source of deriving truth, in my opinion. The problem is we can't do that for everything. There are some things in our current stage of development as humans, we just can't prove. So we rely on revelation or indirect evidence. And that's where divine revelation comes in. We need it for certain things at this point. Now, maybe in the future, we'll develop technology that will allow us to peer deeper into the fabric of reality than we can currently with our current technology. But right now, we simply can't prove everything about the universe in which we live. We have to rely on some sort of faith. Now, the question is, which faith brings us closest to those spiritual truths that actually are? Is it Christianity? Is it Islam? Is it Buddhism? Is it Hinduism? Is it one of the other religions? Is it atheism? Is it something else? So there's all these questions. As far as the canon is not something that Christ commissioned. And I talk about the modern canon, 66 books. It's just not. It's not an inherently Christian concept. So I don't feel the need to hold to any sort of canon personally. But I can see how other people would like to have a canon that is the standard or measuring stick by which our faith is judged. And to me, the measuring stick is the words of Christ himself. I don't need more than that. I don't need the epistles of Paul. I don't need the book of Revelation. I don't need all these extraneous texts that are, basically not in any way directly corresponding to the teachings of Christ. So to me, I just look, what did Christ teach? This is how the early church thought. The early church, the canon will also, when I investigated this personally, I found that the very early church really didn't have this emphasis on a canon. It really was all about the teachings of Christ and what Christ taught. And the canon kind of developed later when the church tried to figure out which books or texts best represented that. But it wasn't there at the beginning. It wasn't something that was inherent to the faith. This is something that's very difficult to accept for modern Christians, because the idea of a canon has been something that is a tradition that was established thousands of years ago. So today, it's just hard to imagine Christianity without a canon. But yeah, if you look back to the origins of Christianity, the first couple centuries, there was no canon. There was no list of texts that people looked at and said, these are the only books that teach us the truth of the religion. And I confirmed that by my own analysis. Um, so really, the solution to all that, and the problem, a lot of the problems I see in Christianity, is to recognize that the canon isn't our rule of faith. It's the words of Christ. And the words of Christ are only contained in a small portion of the current canon. So most of the canon is extraneous or superfluous, and can also, and most of it, in my opinion, a lot of it is distortional. So there's that. Intelligent design versus evolution. I all of these things, morality and ethics, nature of mind. These are kind of the things. I don't know if there's anyone out there who would like to discuss these things. If not, all of these things, morality and ethics, discuss some things that have been on my mind. One thing I'll notice is that something that kind of concerns me is right now in the United States, which is where I live, it is football season. Now, why am I going to talk about football? Because here's the thing. I feel like sports is actually kind of a religion to a lot of people. We got Ligmael, Andy. I haven't seen you in a while, I feel like. It's good to see you, though. So, I was someone who in my past was very entertained by sports. And I followed it very closely, and I was invested in it emotionally. My teams, I wanted them to win. I got sad when they didn't win. I got happy when they did win. But over time, I've actually kind of moved away from that personally. I just feel like sports are entertaining, but I'm no longer emotionally invested in it. Like I watch it, especially when other people are watching it, and everyone's there and talk. It's kind of a social event, but I really am no longer emotionally invested in sports, and I feel like my life has improved pretty dramatically as a result of that. I've been much more productive as a human being, and ultimately, while sports are entertaining and can be inspiring at times, they're not they're not ultimately at the end of the day something that's extremely important. There are far more important things going on our side. We got this one guy. Good to see you. Sports, I believe, and I say this because I'm watching football and I just see these stadiums full of people and they're just enraptured by what's happening. And I just try to analyze it almost psychologically. Like, I understand people need entertainment. Like, you can't just wake up in the morning and just be a robot and just, work for the kingdom all day, every day, or do whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. Like, people as human beings are, we need a psychological break. We do. We need entertainment. But the problem comes when we put the entertainment above the things that matter. And I'm wondering if people do that with sports. And I think it's pretty obvious that, at least in the United States, and I think a lot around the world, we kind of do. Maybe not football in other places, but I guess, like, in other places, I guess it is football. They call it football, but for us, it's soccer in the United States. Like, people get wrapped up in sports, and as someone who used to be, I wouldn't say addicted to sports, but very invested in it emotionally, I kind of see this as a problem. I wonder if all the energy and effort that was put into sports could be better utilized doing other things. And I think it's pretty obvious that it can. Think of all the money that's spent on sports and sports gambling and things like that. What if that was put towards, actually helping people and, hospitals and stuff and things like that, and education, and, there's just a million things that are more important than sports, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't watch sports or shouldn't participate, because, sports can be good for you, especially when you're participating. It keeps you healthy and things like that. And I did play sports when I was younger. Not that I was the best at it. I mean, I was decent, but so I think there's value there. There's absolutely value there. But also, I think that it's taken to a pretty far level. It's unhealthy in many ways. And I would like to see a reduction in the extent to which people pay attention to sports and invest themselves in it and care about it. Now, I'm not arguing that we should eliminate sports from society and that it has no place and, we should ban it or anything like that. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not arguing people should never watch sports at all, because I do that. What I am trying to argue is that if people are out there and sports is something that's very important to them, well, I just want to let you know, I think that there's way more important things you could be doing with your life than watching sports or being invested in sports. There's really important things happening in the world, and you could be a part of that. For every second you watch sports or all the money you spend on sports, that's just that much less time you get to do something important with your life or help somebody or do something productive. Likewise, the money. Think of all the money people spend on sports. Like some of these sporting events are hundreds or even thousands of dollars. What if just a small fraction of that went to like, I'm sure you could think of things that are more important than sports for our society that we could contribute to. So this is just something I've been thinking about. Again, it's probably going to hurt some people's feelings, but oh well. I think it's helpful. I know it's for me. I feel like reducing the amount of attention I pay to sports has improved my life by allowing me, first of all, not to care about something that ultimately isn't all that important. But I feel like I can just do more with my life. I feel like, cleaning my house or my living space is something I can do instead of is pretty much anything. I can go to the store, I can interact with other people, I can do things in my community, whatever. That I feel like I used to sit around and watch sports, almost all of my free time. Now I've drastically reduced that. And in that time, I've actually been able to fill it with other far more productive things, just objectively more important. I mean, assuming there is such thing as objective importance in the universe. So I'm just kind of thinking about this. It's not a big deal. It's just something I've been thinking since the NFL season started, and I kind of have been thinking it for the last couple of years of how I'm starting to see it more and more. How just asking the question: what if people cared as much about things that are important as they do about sports? As they got all excited about, and maybe some people do. And maybe I don't know. Like it's just maybe I'm just seeing something that isn't there. I don't know. It's so all right. So again, I said this was a discussion. Again, I'm going to try more of a limited one-on-one idea for people who want to join. Again, no one has to join. I'm going to pin the link. If no one joins, I'm just going to kind of go on my own here. So Christian doctrine. Oh, by the way, before I do that, let me remove that real fast because I don't want people to join when I'm trying to do something. Let me get rid of that real fast. Yeah, I'll put it back up in a second. I want people to see my channel real fast and just kind of update them on some things. Uh, get this ready for a second. So last couple of days, I've had some a video I put up. So I had this video that I put up a few days ago, or I uploaded a few days ago on my channel. Do the unforgivable sin versus disprove the Trinity. I feel like that was a pretty interesting analysis. Now, in my personal opinion, I think the unforgivable sin verses, which I analyzed in the video, so I'm not going to go through it all right now, do pose a very serious problem to Trinitarian theology. Do they go so far as to disprove it? That's for you to decide, or that's for you to think about. But I do absolutely believe that there's an issue there. And also, I want to let people know that that video is based on a Substack article. So if you go to the top of my channel, there is a link to my Substack. When you click on the link, it takes you here. I don't know why it does this. I think this is annoying. So if you go to Substack, here's my Substack. You say no thanks. Here's the things that I've written on my Substack. Like this is the last one I wrote. So this is my analysis. Do the unforgivable sin versus disprove the Trinity. And so you can go to my Substack and read my argument. I try to go away. I try to lay it all out there. I think it's pretty interesting analysis, to be honest. But I just want to let people know that I do have a Substack, and I'm thinking about doing more content there. So, take a look at that. And again, I'm thinking about trying to just post ideas like this, just kind of things I'm thinking about, ideas I'm coming across that I think are important. So, all right. So I just wanted to show people that I do have a Substack and go and take a look at that. Okay. We can get rid of that. So let's post that link again, see if anyone wants to join. Oh, let's get rid of this. Okay. All right. So there's the link if anyone wants to join. Again, or if people just want to discourse or dialogue from the chat, that is fine as well. So we'll see what happens. But until anyone joins or has anything to say, maybe I'll just kind of talk about things until someone else brings something else up, and then we can move from there. But so the main thrust of my channel is really to get people to a point where they embrace what I believe are the great truths about life's purpose, what we're supposed to be doing here, how did everything get started, origins discussion, things like that. So, in my opinion, one of the big when we look around the world, what do we see? We see suffering. So a big part of religion, in addition to explaining how everything came to be, is how did everything get here? Oh, excuse me, is how do we eliminate the suffering in this world? And I do believe that the teachings of Christ do actually provide a pathway for that, which is why I promote Christianity and consider myself a Christian, because I do think the teachings of Christ are true, and that they do lead to the solution to the problems we see in this world. The problem is that Christianity is not being properly taught in modern institutions. So Christianity isn't being taught properly in the Protestant denominations or the Catholic denominations or the Eastern Orthodox denominations, which is pretty much all the major ones. And I could go through the problems with each one and explain what the problems are. But the main problem is this. Basically, especially when it comes to Protestantism, it has become a religion that is based on affirming the correct propositions. Like, you have to believe the right things in order to, quote unquote, be saved. And it's all about basically looking out for yourself and making sure you don't go to hell. Okay, and that is absolutely part of everything. But really, the teachings of Christ are very practical. They're very directed towards creating a better world in the here and now. And I feel like if you're not doing that, then you're not going to be worthy of the kingdom. Okay? Christianity, the solution to so what is the problem? A big part of the problem in terms of human relations is sinfulness. Okay? So modern Christianity, and I think this probably could apply to all the different denominations. The solution to the sin problem is apparently, as it's taught, God sending down his son, who apparently also is God somehow, to be brutally murdered by a group of people. And somehow God sees this as a good thing. And this brutal, unjustified murder, God likes it. And God accepts that brutal murder, that unjustified murder, as a sort of redeeming sacrifice for the sins of all other mankind. So God having his own son killed is basically something God accepts as a sacrifice for the sins of mankind. So this is what people are taught. So God sent down his son to be killed, and his son was killed. And if you believe that his son was killed for you and murdered, and his blood was shed, then your sins are forgiven and you're covered, and problem solved, right? Well, not problem solved, because what's going on? Well, everything's going on as normal. Everything's still very chaotic, disordered. people are still doing all the things that lead to suffering and cause suffering, and nothing's really been solved, except that a bunch of people have come to believe some facts that aren't even really facts, in my opinion. So what are the facts you're supposed to believe? Yeah, you're supposed to believe that Jesus Christ is a savior, and the reason he's a savior is because he was killed in your place. And I'm pretty sure this is kind of, there are variations of this. They wouldn't all say it obviously in that exact language. And the Catholics will say, well, we believe that, but also you have to do some good stuff here, and you have to, confess your sins to the Father, to the priest, and all that. And the Protestants are far more forward. They're just like, yeah, okay, that sounds about right. But what is really solved by this? Is this really a plan from God to solve the problems of mankind? Hey, objective. I'm doing fine. How are you? Also, this is a discussion, so feel free to jump in. Anyone can feel free to jump in at any time. I'm just kind of discussing things, and you don't have to just talk about what I'm talking about. You can kind of bring up other topics, but yeah, people are welcome to join. So the problem with this presentation of Christianity, which is what a lot of people are taught, and a lot of good people too. I'm not saying they're bad people or anything like that. A lot of people who believe it. The problem is it really actually does not solve the sin problem. Why? Because people keep sinning. The problem of sin is that people are sinning. So what's going to stop that? Is it God's Son being murdered on the cross? Preparations for my debate on the 26th. Okay, so maybe, give us a few more details. If you want to post in the chat where that debate is taking place and which channel it's on and more details, feel free to do so. I absolutely want to see that debate. So I really give me the details. Whose channel is it? What's it about? Who are you debating? All that. Feel free to post that. Excuse me. So God sent his son, and to be killed 2,000 years ago. What do we see in the world today? Is the sin problem solved? When you look around, do we feel like the problem of sin has been resolved? I would say no. I would say it's pretty awful out there. It's still pretty awful. We still have massive amounts of sin at the highest levels of our societies and the lowest levels, and that's really what leads to pretty much all of the problems. People, so yeah. I mean, you don't have to post the link, but just kind of describe. You can just write in the chat like it's on this guy's channel, so it's on Tristan's channel, which is I forget the name of his channel. I'm sorry about that. I forget the name of his channel. It might be just his name. There it is. Yeah, it will be hosted by Tristan Great Gabriel, 21st Century Minds channel. And what is the debate proposition, if I might ask? So I think that what Christians are being taught about Christianity is really not solving the problem. The problem of sin has not been solved. So what actually does solve the problem of sin, which is the source of so much suffering in this world, and probably all suffering? The solution to sin is that people have to stop sinning. And that's the thing that people don't want to accept. That's really the only way. And God clearly is not going to force us to do that. Okay? So here's the thing. I believe when you read the words of Jesus, this is what Jesus actually taught. And I'm going to read this verse to you right here. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. This is how, Jesus very clearly stating how one enters into heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay. So, righteousness. Where does righteousness come from? Does it come from Christ, from God giving us the righteousness of Christ? Well, no. That's not where it comes from. So let's take a look. If you go to the Bible, you go to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Where do we get our righteousness from? According to the Bible, if we're to take that seriously, it will be right. This is Deuteronomy 6:20. This is God speaking. This is Yahweh speaking right here. Well, actually, no, this is Moses. but speaking about what God has told him. It will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all the commandments before our Lord God, just as he commanded us. So this is how humans attain to righteousness. We observe and obey God's commands. So let's go back to what Jesus said. I'm going to get to you in a second, objective ethics. So Jesus Christ said, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." Okay, well, what is righteousness? Righteousness is, as we just learned from Deuteronomy 6:20, obeying the commands of God. So what this verse could say is that, "For I say to you that unless your obedience to God surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." And I think when you interpret it that way, you will see that Jesus Christ actually was teaching the solution to the sin problem. What Jesus Christ is actually teaching is that if you don't sin, you will be righteous, and you, first of all, you'll enter kingdom, but also sinning is that which causes suffering in this world. So you will be the actual solution to the sin problem. There's no other solution except that all people use their free will to not sin. So this is why modern Christianity is so dangerous, because it doesn't teach this. It doesn't teach people that they have to stop sinning to enter heaven. It doesn't teach people that the solution to the sin problem is based on their own agency, their own willpower. It's all about what God's going to do for you and how God's going to save you. No, God's not going to save you unless you do the right thing. You have to be righteous, and the righteousness must come from within your own self. Should we use the Bible as the foundation for society? I am taking the negative position. Okay, so who is your opponent? Is it someone that is well known, or is it someone, not that matters, I'm just kind of curious, like, who are you debating exactly? The Bible, Kevin Berger is here. Again, for anyone who's just joining, this is an open discussion, or not an open discussion. I actually did say at the beginning that this is not an open discussion. This is a kind of more of a closed discussion, but I've pinned the link and no one's joined. So I will kind of do like first come, first serve for whoever wants to join, and kind of have a discussion about these kinds of topics, or whatever you feel is important. But the Bible can be a useful tool. It is also imperfect despite claims to the contrary. Yeah, you're right. The modern Bible does have some serious issues. Now, does that mean no truth is not valuable? No, I'm not saying that at all, because it does contain a lot of ultimate truths that are very important. But we shouldn't approach it in a way that's not objective. Now, if someone could prove that the Bible is perfect, then they would have to do that. But I agree with Kevin here that basically there are issues with the Bible, but there are no issues with God, in my opinion. God is a perfect being. The question is, how do we understand this God? How do we come to a proper understanding of God? And I think that there are a variety of tools that humans can use. Obviously, the most important would be direct observation and empiricism. So rational empiricism is the most effective tool for approaching God. But the problem is that can only take us so far. For the things that we can empirically verify, we should utilize our senses. He is a seminary teacher and may be a MS Divinity Minister. I'm not sure about all his credentials, but I know he graduated seminary, so I assume he has a master's in divinity at the very least. Wow. Well, that sounds like a very interesting debate, which is on the 26th on the Tristan Gabriel's 21st Century Minds channel. So I absolutely plan on being there and watching it. And if I am unable to watch it live, which right now I think I should be able to watch it live, but if I can't watch it live, I'm absolutely going to watch it after it's done on the VOD. So I think that should be a really interesting conversation. I'm personally looking forward to it. So I plan on either being there or watching it at some point. And you're debating someone who's, I think that person's going to have a hard time if he takes the if he takes the modern, the conventional evangelical approach, I see these types get circles run around them all the time by secularists and atheists. I really think my approach really solves a lot of the problems that has been seen traditionally in defending Christianity, which is why I take the approach I do, because I just think that based on analyzing all these conversations, first of all, there is a lot of merit to what the atheists or the skeptics are saying. And second of all, but the problem is that I think the problem with the skeptics is they throw out the baby with the bathwater. So yeah, they point to the parts of the Bible that are problematic, but then they go ahead and say, well, then there's nothing valuable in the Bible, which I also think is false. I will be taking questions at the end, but my opponent may run away as soon as we'll wait and see if that happens or not. All right, we have our first esteemed guest. We have Kevin Berger. Good to. How are you? Actually, can you say if you? It sounds like me like your audio might be a little bit off. Say like so. Just
I'm all right.
introduce.
How are you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's your audio is a little bit muffled, but I think it's good enough to hear what you're saying. The first thing you said, it sounded to me like a problem, but so first of all, Kevin, why don't you just I don't know what it is exactly you want to talk about. I assume it's something I've been talking about, but if not, why don't you just introduce yourself and give us a few ideas or thoughts to run with, and we'll see we can go from there.
Uh, well, I don't really have anything at the moment.
Oh, really? You just wanted to,
No. I'm
you're just kind
I'm
of
just interested
joining
in
just
something fun.
okay. Well, I mean, do you mind if I just ask some questions to get things rolling a little bit with, asking you about your personal beliefs, or are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. However, I seem to be getting an echo of the audio for some reason.
Yeah, and there's a gigantic delay between when I stop talking and when you start answering. So there's some sort of technical issue going on. How about this? Sometimes if you drop out of the studio and rejoin, it solves the problem. So why don't you? How about this? Go into the StreamYard, click Exit Studio, and then rejoin, and let's see if maybe that's maybe solves some of the issues we're seeing.
All right.
Is anyone else kind of seeing that? Was anyone else kind of seeing those technical problems? How like there was like literally 20 seconds between the time stopped talking and the time he answered the question, which I don't think that's his fault. I think it's just probably something going on with his connection or something. Yeah, believe it or not, objective. Believe it or not, okay, yeah. So there was a big delay. All right, yeah. It's going to be kind of hard to have a conversation with someone when there's technical difficulties like that. As much as I would like to do it, but let's see if we can solve them. So yeah, my approach has been the result of analyzing a lot of the kinds of discussions that I see on skeptical channels, debates, and things like that. Okay, let's see if we can. All right, let's see if we can get it any better. All right, so do you mind if I just kind of ask you some questions and just kind of about what you believe and kind of trying to figure out if we can go somewhere from there? Nothing. Hmm.
It's still doing the echo. It's not gonna work.
Darn. Hmm. You might try fiddling around with your settings or something. Um, it could be if you go into StreamYard and go into the settings, then go to maybe audio. Just kind of click around the settings and see if you can maybe adjust the audio to go to the audio specifically. If you go into the settings in the StreamYard, yeah, look at this. There is also audio echo cancellation feature you can select. So if you go to, let's see here, go to settings, audio. All right, if you can hear what I'm saying, go to the settings, go to audio, and there's a little button there that says echo cancellation. Try that. See if that does anything.
So I was trying to use my headphones. Now I'm just using the computer speakers, and we'll see if that resolves the issue. And fingers crossed there won't be a feedback issue.
All right, that actually sounds a lot better. Is it sounding better on your end?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
I think we're good.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about StreamYard, but technical issues arise very often on StreamYard, and sometimes it's solved by unplugging, headphones. Sometimes it's solved by messing around the settings. It's hard to know exactly what the issue is, but anyways, my question to you was, since you joined, you just kind of wanted to. I guess my question is, would you want to talk about, like the kind of things I've been talking about, like Christianity, the Bible, and just kind of going through what you believe and why you believe it?
Pretty much all of that is fair game with me.
All right. So,
and I'll preface this by saying that I have some very unorthodox views.
Yeah. So I remember your email that you sent to me, and I remember a little bit about it. But why don't you just kind of do the same thing you did in your email? Just kind of introduce yourself and kind of like the basis. You don't have to go into details, but the overarching concept of what it is you believe in and why you believe it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is kind of explain a little bit about myself in a roundabout way by bringing up two things that I have found that drive atheists absolutely bonkers when they're talking to me. And I realize that every atheist is different, so this isn't going to apply to everybody. It's just a general observation that I found. And the first thing that I found that drives them crazy is that I describe myself as an irreligious agnostic theist. So I'll put that down. Irreligious in that I don't subscribe to any established organized religion. I don't think that anybody has the pure, unadulterated truth. I think that, a lot of them have truth to some degree, but I don't know that anyone has the truth. And I think a lot of them have a litany of issues with them, which is why, despite their incessant claims to the contrary, I am not an apologist. I am a polemicist. So, an apologist deals with defending positions, and a polemicist is the one who's constantly poking holes in them. It just so happens that the holes that I am poking more often than not are with atheists, because I consider the religious claims a lot of times to be low-hanging fruit. Like atheists already deal with that, and they deal with the low-hanging fruit. I'm holding the mirror up to them and saying, y'all are doing the same things a lot of the time. I am agnostic in that I don't know that any deity exists. I don't claim to know any deity exists. I'm not even sure if it's possible to know that any deity exists. And I am a theist in that, based on the consensual usage of the term God, I do assent to the proposition that something that could be called one does exist on a provisional basis. Whether we would choose to use that term or not, I think there are a lot of times it would come down to a choice of, do I want to use the label God, or do I want to use some other alternative label? And I don't know that one is necessarily the right or wrong one to use, if that makes sense.
How do you feel about the just call it like when you discuss theism, how would you define your concept of the creator, God, whatever label you want to use? What is the definition by which you work when you're trying to establish the belief that you have that is theistic? Like
So
what constitutes God? What would constitute God in your opinion?
to me, I'm intentionally using the broadest possible definition because okay, so there are two things that I heard atheists say during debates that really stuck with me, and it started making me question, okay, are you really being as rational as you put on? One of them was in a debate with Cy Ten Bruggencate. Matt Dillahunty said, not every religion can be right, but they can all be wrong. And it occurred to me that while that is true, even if every religion were wrong, that still wouldn't mean that there is no such thing as any deity of any kind anywhere. So that was one of the first things is like, well, hold on a second. That doesn't really fly. And then the other one was a debate with Michael Shermer. And in the vein of Arthur C. Clarke's laws, I'm not sure what the laws of robotics or which ones they were, but he had the law that any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. And Michael Shermer decided that he came up with what he calls his last law, which is any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial intelligence would be indistinguishable from God. And it occurred to me when I heard that not only is that true, he didn't go far enough. Any sufficiently advanced organism would literally be a god if you're looking at the term without any religious context at all. So, for example, if you're looking at the deity of the Abrahamic faiths, if you're looking at Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever you want to call it, any deity that is credited with the creation of the earth or to have existed prior to the earth would be an extraterrestrial by default, because you can't be terrestrial if there is no terra. So essentially it becomes a question of the MCU Thor, where some people call him the god of thunder and other people, look at him as if he's an extraterrestrial, because technically he is. In the MCU, Asgard is another planet. So it becomes a question of a neutral Scotsman or a false dichotomy or something. It's like all you're talking about is a different label that you assign to this arbitrarily. And so based on that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to have a serious conversation about whether any deity of any kind exists anywhere, I have to use the most broad definition for that as I possibly can, which includes pantheism and panentheism, which a lot of times atheists won't even have that conversation. That conversation typically devolves into, well, why call the universe God? Why not just call the universe the universe? Like, they don't need a reason. Like, words aren't prescriptive, they're descriptive. That's something that they say all the time, but when the shoe's all on your foot, they don't want to deal with that. And it's funny to me because another one of the objections that they'll use is, okay, say somebody says the universe is God or co-equal to God. The universe exists, therefore God exists. And I accept that. Well, then they want to come out and they want to smuggle in all this baggage. As soon as you raise that objection, you've already smuggled the baggage for them. Because they didn't say it. You did. I am of the mindset that if I'm having a conversation with someone who is a pantheist and they say the universe is God, we're like, okay, I agree with you. Okay, by the usage that you're using, yes, a God exists. And then if that person says, and God wants blah, 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 like, no, now you've made a separate claim, and that claim needs to be substantiated too. You don't get to jump from one to the other. There are no free rides. That's another thing that drives me bonkers when I'm dealing with atheists, because the other thing that I have found that makes them very, very angry is when I explain to them, yes, they do have a burden of proof. And I will explain why that is. Atheism is a spectrum. So on the far end, opposite of religious adherence, you have the Gnostic atheists or the anti-theists or whatever term you prefer to use, because they can't
Hard
decide
atheist.
on that. Pardon?
Hard atheism.
No, hard. Well, again, they can't decide on anything for sure. So I'm using hard atheism as something else, and I'll come back to that. So these are the ones, the rare people like R and Ra, who will actually make the claim no deities of any kind exist anywhere. Okay, they're rare. Someone will go on the limb and make that claim. Okay, if they make that claim, then they have a burden of proof for that claim. That one is straight. Then if we come back a step from the polar opposite, then you have what most people would refer to as hard atheism or positive atheism or strong atheism. What I, in my book, refer to as propositional atheism. Hi, sweetheart.
What are you doing?
I'm talking to people. Sorry.
No problem.
They believe that no deity exists, but they refrain from making that claim. Okay? Since they're not making the claim, they're believing it. Knowledge does not equal belief, and a claim of knowledge does not equal a statement of belief. They don't have a burden of proof for that. However, that position is typically accompanied by something along the lines of, I don't have faith, I have reasonable expectation based on evidence. That is a claim. And if you're making that claim as that type of atheist, then that implies that your belief that no deity exists also has an evidentiary basis. And you would have the burden of proof for that instead.
All right, let me ask you something. Let's say, and this is something I hear, I don't reject. I'm gonna try and play the atheist here.
Okay.
I don't reject the idea of God. I just lack a belief in God, just like you lack a belief in leprechaun.
That's where most of them fall. Okay.
Let me finish, just for the audience sake.
Okay.
So I lack a belief in God, just like you lack a belief in leprechauns. So I don't have to prove anything. So how would you respond to an atheist who says that?
And that's where they're wrong. And it took me, I'll be honest, it took me a while to figure out where the issue is, but they're wrong. And I'll explain why.
Okay.
Beliefs are non-contentiously brain activity. Not all brain activity are beliefs, but all beliefs are in fact brain activity. There's no contention there. Okay. So when you say, I don't believe this or this, what you are implying is that there is a third doxastic disposition that is neither belief in P nor belief in not P. That is the burden of proof that most atheists incur, but they'll deny it. And then they'll try to conflate it with knowledge and assertions of knowledge and justification and certainty and all kinds of other things. Like if you're saying that you don't believe this or this, then what you're saying is that there is a mental state in which there is a perfect equilibrium. And that has never been demonstrated.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I've never heard someone make this argument so I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But I'm just gonna try to keep playing the atheist.
Okay.
All right, let me try this.
Maybe you'll come up with something that I haven't heard already.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to see how your typical Matt Dillahunty type atheist would respond to this. So, again, going back to the example of leprechauns, and let's say
Mhm.
I'm playing Matt Dillahunty.
Okay.
I'm not the one who's telling everyone that leprechauns exist. You
True.
are. You're the only
Correct.
one who has so that means that you're the one who has the burden of proof to prove leprechauns. And
No.
all I'm doing, well, let me finish what he would say. All I'm doing is saying, I haven't seen evidence of leprechauns. I'm waiting for proof to arise. So, how does that? I would kind of agree with that. How then does him denying the existence of leprechauns put a burden of proof on him to prove that leprechauns don't exist?
That's not at all what I said.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not the burden of proof for the non-existence of leprechauns that he has. It's the proof for the claim about human cognition that he incurs a burden of proof for. Because what he's saying is we know that there's a mental state that corresponds with believing P.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever P is, even number of gumballs. Okay. We know that there is a burden of proof, or not a burden. We know that there is a mental state that corresponds with not P.
All right.
Or odd number of gumballs. What he's implying, what he needs to be true, is that there's a third mental state where there's no bias at all in even versus odd. You understand what I'm saying? For brain activity that is neither of those. That's the burden of proof. It doesn't matter what, and that's the thing is, it doesn't matter whether we're having the conversation about whether or not a God exists. The topic can be anything. Anytime you're dealing with binary propositions, even versus odd, on versus off, whatever, doesn't matter. As long as it's yes or no, then we know that there's brain activity that corresponds with yes. We know that there's brain activity that corresponds with no.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the brain activity that is neither of those? And there are. I have dozens and dozens of references that I've cited where, yes, we have established a difference in brain activity between atheists and religious people.
Okay.
We have not demonstrated a difference in the brain activity between hard atheists and soft atheists. And that is the point of contention. So,
all right, let me
analogy that I've used, which might help you. Okay. There are four subjects in a room. Subject A says, I know there is an even number of gumballs in that jar.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be our analog for a religious person.
Okay. Yeah.
Subject B says, I know there's an odd number of gumballs in that jar.
All right.
That is our analog for an anti-theist or Gnostic atheist. Okay.
All right.
Forget about them. They don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can easily be distinguished from the others by the act of making a claim one way or the other.
Right.
Are we agreed on that?
Yes.
Okay. Subject C believes that there's an odd number of gumballs, but doesn't claim it. Says, I could be mistaken, but I'm leaning toward there being odd. Okay. Subject D simply lacks belief that there's an even number of gumballs.
Okay.
They're both agnostic because neither one of them is making a claim. Neither one of them is certain. Neither one of them is necessarily justified. I assume that they're both willing to change their mind, and I would assume also that subject B, who says, I know one way or the other, that person would even be willing, if new evidence was presented, like, you know what, I was wrong, okay? Since both subject C can say, I lack belief that there's an even number of gumballs, and both of them can say, I believe that there's an odd number of gumballs, by what independently verifiable means could you tell who is subject B? I'm sorry, who is subject C and who is subject D? How would you tell them apart? As far as I can tell, there is no difference. It's like saying that 0.9 repeating is different from 1. Like conceptually,
Well,
yes.
let me.
And notationally, yes. But in every meaningful way, 0.9 repeating equals 1.
Yeah, here's my thing. So subject C said, I lean towards there being an odd number,
Right?
but I don't know.
Right.
And subject D said, I simply lack a belief in there being an even number.
Right. But either one of them can express either position. The mere fact that they say something doesn't make it true. What we need to determine is which person actually holds which disposition. And you can't rely on the self-report.
I don't know. To me, it seems to me, and I might be wrong, just because I haven't heard this argument before about the burden of proof, I may not have adequately, understood the depths of it. But it does seem to me like subject C has at least somewhat taken a stance, whereas subject D is just remaining completely independent of whatever the case may be. It sounds to me like subject C. Here's the difference. Subject C is like, well, I tend to think this, but I admit I don't know. Whereas subject D is just in an absolute state of no claim one way or the other, just waiting to see what the evidence is. So I can see subject D being like, if someone counts them and there's an even number, I'll go with that. And I won't be surprised. Same with odd. I won't be surprised one way or the other. Whereas subject C will be like, oh, I kind of thought it was odd, but it turns out it's even if it turns out to be that way. So I don't know.
I have 3 answers.
Okay, go ahead.
I've come up with it's a trifecta. Okay, either because beliefs are brain activity. Again, that's not contentious. We could look at, hypothetically, the brain activity and determine which one is which. Hypothetically. In principle, we should be able to do that if there is, in fact, a difference. Okay? The issue with that is we don't have that evidence, in which case, if we apply Hitchens' razor, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So anyone who claims that there's a difference between those two, any phenomenological difference between them, we can just dismiss it. Well, until you bring me evidence of a difference in the brain activity that corresponds with each of these positions, I have every right, and arguably I'm obligated to reject that claim.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. So alternatively, option B is we can look at behavior because belief informs action. The issue with that one is that any action that could be attributed to not believing something to be true could also be attributed to believing that it's false. And since belief informs action and an absence of belief can't logically inform anything, there's more explanatory power in the idea that they believe it's false. The third leg of that trifecta is that we can't tell the difference and we're relying solely on self-report, in which case the absence of belief can't logically be the null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis would have to be that you lean one way or the other. This is not going to say that you lean a specific way. Just you're going to be biased one way or the other.
Yeah.
And part of the issue with that is that belief isn't a choice. Okay. And belief, everyone has this idea that belief is contingent solely on evidence and good arguments and sound reasoning. And it's not. It's way messier than that. Belief is impacted by your beliefs, by your biases, by other cognitive functions, culture influences, emotions, intuition, your personal experiences, your pre-existing beliefs, social pressures, system one cognition, your upbringing. There's all these other things, and any one of them can cause you to be biased one way or the other, and the vast majority of them you have no control over.
I'm going to disagree with you there, because I think that we do choose what our beliefs are, and that we kind of our predispositions to believe one thing or the other are under our control. They're under the agency of our will. But when our will basically develops a spirit of resistance to truth, then we delude ourselves, and that we don't see it as a choice, but ultimately it kind of is a choice because we are appealing to what makes us comfortable. So I think this happens on both the religious and non-religious spectrum. I think religious people do tend to adopt belief systems that bring them comfort as opposed to just trying to seek pure truth. I think the problem with atheists is that they think that they've escaped that kind of mentality, but they really are doing the same thing. It's just they are not within the realm of religion, but non-religion. But still, they are still basically developing their beliefs based on their emotional preferences. So they would prefer that there not be a God, that there not be a judgment, that there not be eternal souls, which will be judged by God for various reasons. And therefore, they tend to interpret evidence in light of what they prefer, just like religious people. It brings them comfort to think that there's a God who will give them an eternal dwelling place without suffering, and they'll live forever and they'll never experience annihilation. So they tend to interpret evidence that way. The problem is, what is the actual truth? So you can be biased and still believe what's true. Now, your methodology didn't bring you to the truth, but basically you got lucky. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is, I do believe people choose their beliefs, and that's. But I see what you mean. I think it's probably like more semantic, our difference, than anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if we sufficiently do not want to believe something for emotional reasons, then we will reject the evidence that's put before us and continue to believe what is emotionally comfortable to us as human beings. So I don't know if you have anything to comment on that.
I don't know. Well, the vast majority of the literature that I've read on it holds that the case is that doxastic involuntarism is true, that we can't just come to believe something by sheer force of will.
Really?
Yes.
So how do people change their minds? Like, there's a lot of atheists who've converted, and there are a lot of religious people who've also deconverted. So what is it that happens that these people change their beliefs so radically and fundamentally?
It comes down to, like I said, all those various factors, that soup of factors that are involved in belief formation in the first place. Like it only takes, like I said, one of those many different factors to cause someone to deviate from whatever position they had previously. I would think because people tend to be emotional creatures, a lot of the time emotion ends up being a major motivating factor.
I think that when people live in delusion, whether it be within the framework of religion or non-religion, what is driving them is a desire for personal comfort over truth. So I think one thing that people need to do is put truth over personal comfort and what you would prefer the truth to be. I think when people do that, which would obviously come from within themselves, only then can they see the evidence in its true light. For instance, let's take the case of atheists, but I could also use the case of religious people.
Mhm.
One thing that is very common among atheists is to believe in Darwin's theory of evolution. And because I think that there is and again, before you respond, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but let me just kind of finish my point. And maybe I'm not even saying I'm not trying to argue with for evolution one way or the other. I'm just trying to say that, make a point. Let's just say evolution's false, and I think there's reason to believe that, but let's just give that. Okay. Why would the people who believe in evolution, they do so because they are putting their emotional comfort over the objective evidence, so that they interpret the evidence in such a way that will basically pacify their feelings. But once someone arrives at a place within themselves where they say, you know what, I'd rather just believe what's true, and it doesn't, if it's one way or the other, I'm just going to, only then can they look at the evidence and say, actually, you know what, there's a lot of reasons that evolution is false, and then they come to the truth. So that impetus does come from within and within an internal change. And it basically, it does come down to a choice to want truth more than what makes you feel good.
Why do you want to accept what is true rather than what makes you feel comfortable? What causes you?
Well, you could
that in the first place.
You could come to the position that believing what's true is ultimately more beneficial than believing what's false, because I believe that the universe is designed in such a way that believing falsehood will only lead to problems either in the short term or the long term. So you could think to yourself, you know what, believing what's false has, created all these problems for me.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to believe what's
true. How did you come to that conclusion, though, is my question.
Maybe something really bad happened to you as a result of your false beliefs.
Exactly. It's still ultimately something that was external to yourself. That external experience brought you to the decision, you know what, I need to consider things from a different point of view. Okay?
Yeah,
and
but
that again, you want to choose something, to believe something that's true rather than something that's comfortable. And then when you're presented with the evidence for whatever the claim is, you're still not choosing to believe it. It's the experience of having gone through all that evidence that causes you to believe it, whether you wanted to or not.
That's true. That's true.
Your life experiences, and because here's an easy way to think of it. If belief is based solely on evidence and what is true, the body of evidence is the same for everyone, right?
Theoretically, yes. I mean,
we're all looking essentially at the same evidence, okay? And yet we arrive at different conclusions. Well, why do we arrive at different conclusions when we're looking at the same evidence? Because our life experiences leading up to that point weren't the same.
Well, honestly,
whether for good or ill, whenever we look at the evidence for anything at any time, we're looking through it from a lens of our own personal life experiences. And none of us have that same lens, which is why we'll all end up at conclusions that are slightly different from one another.
There's an interesting hypothetical scenario where it's kind of a thought experiment. Let's say that there are two people, identical twins, born at the same time, obviously. Let's just say they pop out of the womb at the same exact time, which is obviously impossible. Let's just say it happens. It's just a thought experiment. It's all theoretical.
Right.
Pop out of the womb. They're let's just say they're conjoined twins. They attached at the hip, whatever it may be. They all go through life seeing the same things. Maybe not literally attached to the hip, but you get the idea. They go through life basically from the same vantage point, experiencing the same things and undergoing the same exact trials. Is it possible that these two individuals could end up having different beliefs? And this is the idea of how much our environment influences our belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer to the question is yes. Let's say theoretically, two individuals have the exact same experiences up to a certain point in their life. See, to me, this is based on a theory of mind, which says that our beliefs are a result of what's being input to our brains and perceived. But I think because I believe in a form of like basically substance dualism almost, the two individuals have different minds. So they're going to be interpreting the evidence based on their own internal universe and world.
Yeah.
So they can, theoretically, in my opinion, come to a different set of beliefs based on the exact same set of inputs and sensory data.
Exactly.
So, yeah, but the question is, so is it theoretically possible that one of these people could become a theist and one of them could be an atheist? Like one of them could be a Christian and one of them could be a hardline. I believe the answer is yes, which kind of speaks to me that the experiences only go so far. Certainly, they can color the data you have, but they can't be the ultimate determining factor. Is what I would say.
The only way that I could see you could get around that is if you had clones of the exact same brain, and you put those brains in vats, and you essentially manipulate them exactly the same way artificially. Because if you have two different brains and two different bodies, even if they are twins, they're not in the same space at the same time. There is invariably going to be a difference in how they perceive the world externally to themselves. There's just no way around that in the real world. If you were to have clones and the clones were walking around, you'd still have the same issue. So the only way you'd be able to avoid that is like the brain in a vat scenario. So the only input they could possibly have is what you're artificially putting in, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And in that case, maybe they'd have identical beliefs or whatever. But I'm not even sure that would necessarily be the case. Because I mean, as silly as it comes, the MCU, there's still quantum in front of it, because there are different things going on, at the quantum level with, electrons and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that you'd have identical.
Let me ask you. So this goes to theory of mind. Do you believe that mental states are equivalent to brain states?
I think that the one maps onto the other. Okay. I don't believe that the mind can exist without the brain. And the reason for that is you can look at the cases of the person where they have a personality. And if you are of the understanding that the mind, is co-equivalent with the personality and what have you, then once they've experienced brain damage, the personality changes. So there clearly is a link there. I don't know what the specifics are as far as how that link works.
Yeah, let me share something with you. This is see, a lot of people don't. I actually took a lot of psychology. I know that's just a claim that no one has to believe. One thing that everyone learns in psychology, in 101, is the case of Phineas Gage. Now, Phineas Gage was an interesting case because
the corpus callosum guy.
Yeah. So basically,
I remember that.
This guy right here, his name was Phineas Gage. This is one of the most famous cases in all of psychology, where this guy named Phineas Gage, he was working on a railroad, I think was the backstory to this. I could be wrong about that. But he was apparently a very nice person with a very funny, agreeable attitude. A lot of people liked him. Mm-hmm. And one day, while he was doing his work, I can't remember what exactly it was, but it was something where he was around metal stakes or spikes or poles or something. He actually fell face first onto a metal pole and it went straight through his brain, the frontal cortex. And you can see an image of it here. He fell down, and it went through his jaw, up through his cranium, and straight through his brain, and he survived. But obviously, the pole went into his brain and destroyed large portions of his brain as well. Somehow, this man was able to survive this, and he's holding that pole right there in his hand. This is what went through his brain. So this is the famous, and after what happened afterwards, he became a very angry man. He became very hostile. He fought people. He was just a completely different person. So the question is, if our soul is what determines our personality, how is something like this possible? Well, here's what I would say to that. First of all, for me, the soul, the mind, it's all the same thing. It's basically interchangeable terms. The psyche, the spirit, whatever it is. In my opinion, let me just show that anymore. If the brain can be seen as like a radio receiver, if you damage a portion of the receiver, it's going to affect the interaction that the mind is able to have. So if your brain has developed certain centers of basically these systems, areas, locuses, if you want to call them that, where certain parts of your personality are formed or stored, or how the mind has developed that pathway, then if you destroy that pathway, then it will inhibit your mind's ability to interact with you, and thus you will kind of lose that mental faculty. What's interesting, though, and again, I'm not going to go into this too deeply, is that scientists have learned that if given enough time, there is a concept called, let me fix this real fast on my computer. There's a concept called neuroplasticity, which has basically come to demonstrate that our mind can rewire our brain over time. And this is what happens when people recover from very serious injuries.
That's really important for dealing with drug addiction, stuff like that too.
Drug addiction, yes. So neuroplasticity, the question is, if everything is just basically a product of the brain, how is it that doing mental exercises then is able to rewire the brain in such a way that these functions are regained? So these are really interesting questions.
Well, and I have an interesting question too. So you likened the brain to the receiver of the mind, and for me the question I would be curious is like, what if the inverse is true, and the brain is the transmitter to the mind?
Well, okay, yeah. So
obviously, your body and your mind is receiving input. So it could be a two-way communication too. It could be like a walkie-talkie.
It could, yes, it is.
Walkie-talkie.
It has to be. Yes, the mind is both transmitting and receiving, because the sensory inputs, like the eye, it sends a signal to the brain, and then I think your mind reads that signal and basically perceives it, and then you analyze it in other areas of your mind. So I think there's perception is one of the functions of the mind. You're just basically receiving the input, and then there's also the cognitive functions. What would Aristotle call it? He called it what calls the rational function of the mind. So there's perception, but there's different aspects of the mind. It's kind of really interesting. I don't know. People might get bored by this type of conversation, but I think it's important because
right.
Because I think that the nature of the mind so often is fundamentally presupposed by different groups of people. But to me, the idea of I will call it the non-contingency of the mind is so obvious and so necessary that when I see people, I'm not trying to criticize you, but when I see people saying that, talking about brain states being essentially equated to mental states, to me, I don't think about it like that. I think about brains that, it's just as purely a mental state with the mind relating to the brain.
The reason why I would look at it in that terms is, if I recall correctly from the last time I saw you discussing this, you were saying that the mind is non-localized. Is that right?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. All right. I thought that's what you had said. And if that's the case, and the mind only interacts with the subject's brain as long as that subject is physically living. And then you had mentioned that it was pre-eternal and what have you. But if it only interacts with the subject while the mind is inhabiting that shell, then the brain activity is the only thing that we have access to. It's like, so we can hypothesize all kinds of other things as far as, there's some other mental state that's part of the mind but not directly mapped to the brain. But since we don't have any way to check that, that's not helpful in any way at all, other than it's an interesting idea. It's kind of like gravitons and tachyons and wormholes and white holes. Those are all very interesting concepts, but they remain hypothetical concepts because we don't have any way to directly observe and interact and do anything with them.
Yeah. Well, there's a long discussion about why I think that, but yes, during a person's or an organism's life, because I think that also other living organisms have minds, but just like for a squirrel, it'll be like the mind of a squirrel, and even I think perhaps even plants might have minds, but obviously that's not demonstrable. But anyway, let's just talk about humans. During a human's life, yes, the non-local mind is basically only receiving inputs from that individual during the course of that person's life. But I think what happens when we die is that connection, if you want to call it, is severed, and then the non-locality is basically perceivable. Because I think that for whatever reason, this is just how God designed it, and all the mechanics of it aren't provable. But it has been established that while we're alive, our mind is only perceiving and receiving inputs from the physical body.
Right.
Now, it wouldn't be. Go ahead.
And part of the reasoning for me of looking at it in terms of brain activity is that if I'm having a conversation with a skeptic who most of the time they're also empiricists and evidentialists and what have you, that's what they're restricted to anyway.
I actually believe
I'm basically saying, okay, I'm going to use your rules that you've imposed, and now you are bound by those rules too. So you don't get to appeal, not you, but the person I'm having this conversation. You don't get to appeal to some metaphysical mind that's out there in the ether or something, because you can't test that any more than anybody can test their favorite deity or leprechauns or whatever. So if you're not going to accept the claim that Bigfoot exists or that a deity exists or whatever, based on the fact that you don't have empirical evidence of it, et cetera, then you don't get to do that either and say, well, there's this mental state that doesn't map to the brain. Like, no, you don't get that. I deny you that.
Well, I think that's
not my rule. That's not something that I've imposed. That's something that they have imposed. Like, okay,
yeah,
if it's not good enough for you to accept this claim, then it's not going to be good enough for me to accept your claim.
The reason, here's the thing, and I think that there are logical, I would call them empirically based reasons to believe in what I call the non-contingency of the mind, which is basically that it's impossible to establish that all mental activity is the result of activity in the brain. And what I will say is this, that if you believe in the possibility of rational thought, then materialistic conceptualizations of the mind cannot be true. So either materialism and its theory of mind are true, and there's no possibility of rational thought, or materialism is false and rationalism is. And the reason I say that is because Yeah, go ahead. If
No,
materialism
I'm
is
just
true,
agreeing with you.
yeah. If materialism is true, then all mental states are determined by chemical interactions, which
Mhm.
cannot themselves be rational.
Right,
So
right.
if a skeptic is to accept the possibility of rational thinking, he or she has to abandon the idea of material causes determining mental states.
Exactly. If I understand correctly, because I've heard this before, if the person is a materialist and wants to reduce all rationality and what have you to brain activity, then the mere fact that brain activity is just electrical impulses and chemical reactions in the brain, you have no basis for the presumption of its reliability.
Yes. Yes. Well, it goes beyond that. It's impossible for mechanistic material processes to produce rational thinking because because according to materialism, the brain state is what produces deterministically the mental state.
Mm-hmm.
But the material processes themselves are aren't doing anything in such a way to produce an end result. They're just moving around in space mindlessly.
Right.
So producing the right mental state to help an organ survive doesn't matter to them. Let's talk about a bird. The the atoms in the bird's brain don't care if they're configured in the shape of a bird. If that bird smashes into a tree and dies, the atoms don't care. There's no benefit to the atoms being so the atoms in the bird's brain aren't like, oh, I need to stay in the shape of a bird. No, they're just moving around and they're producing supposedly mental states that are basically illusions. They don't care if they continue to persist in the configuration of a bird or not. So the whole point of according to evolution, the whole point of developing rational faculties was to survive better. But the atoms and molecules in our body don't care if they survive, which is basically just staying in these complex configurations we call organisms. So there's no motivation for atoms to, or even possibility of atoms to produce rational mind states. So I think that's a huge problem for the materialistic skeptical position, and also it's very to me it shows that theoretically, or at least at the logical level, because we do tend to have appear to have rational faculties, it does kind of demonstrate to me the non-contingency of the mind from physical matter.
And it also comes down to the dynamic of the virtuous circle versus the vicious circle. It's like ultimately you're either going to have to ground your rational thought in something that is circular reasoning, or you have to appeal to something outside, whether you choose to call that a god or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where was I going to go? So I guess I guess we started all the way back. So I guess going back, I'm not sure if you ever answered my question, like how you define what are the intrinsic qualities. Like if you could define, someone asks you what do you
For a
believe
god,
is God?
for a god.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are the S characteristics of God to you?
Okay, so like I said, I'm using the most broad definition I can. And what I did is I looked at, because I had to jettison any religion, because if you're looking at any religious context, you're automatically restricting the definition.
Mm-hmm.
So I just looked at multiple dictionaries, and the single underlying quality that recurred across multiple dictionaries is you're looking at an entity that is capable of supernatural effects.
Hmm.
And now I'll have to probably explain what I mean by supernatural, because That's another term that gets
Yeah.
muddled.
I was going to ask. I
Okay.
was going to ask.
Supernatural, the definition is not something that's necessarily metaphysical or magical or mystical or outside of reality. It's simply something for which we do not have a scientific explanation. And I have to clarify, it's something that we cannot present tense explain. And it has to be cannot present tense because, one, the verb can is a modal verb. It doesn't have a future tense. You can't will can. So that's one reason. And for another reason, because a lot of people will push back, like, well, just because we don't have an explanation now doesn't mean we're ever going to have one. That's true. The issue is if you use it as an indefinite future, then you're simultaneously committing an escape to the future fallacy, and you're making an unfalsifiable claim. And the reason for that is if I say an asteroid is going to crash into the room where you are in 5 minutes, we can wait 5 minutes and verify whether or not an asteroid actually crashed into the room where you are. If I say an asteroid is going to crash into the room where you are someday, then upon it being observed that an asteroid has not crashed into the room where you are, someone can say, well, someday hasn't arrived yet, forever. And so, like I said, it's unfalsifiable because you can't falsify something without any temporal restriction. Okay? So what that means then is what we're looking at when we're talking about something that is supernatural, is it something that is an intrinsic quality of the thing? It's a category, and categories are mutable. It's like if you have a detective, and the detective has two file drawers. One of them is for solved cases, and one of them is for unsolved cases. If at any point an unsolved case, there's enough evidence to solve it, what do? They moved it into the other file cabinet. That doesn't mean that it was wrong or inappropriate to call it unsolved until that time. And in the exact same way, if we do not have a scientific explanation for something right now, it's not wrong to say that it's supernatural. And if by chance that changes, well, then it's no longer appropriate to call it supernatural. Now it's just something that has been incorporated into our knowledge of nature. But people want to have this hard division between them and say something that is supernatural forever, and something that's natural is natural forever. Well, no. Enlightening is ironically something that is brought up as an example. As well, we thought the lightning was the gods throwing down lightning bolts and whatever, and then we found out that it was natural all along. Like, no, it was without a scientific explanation before, which is what the usage of the term supernatural is.
Yeah.
And now we can scientifically explain it. So
it
was supernatural. Not that we thought it was. It was supernatural based on the usage of the word, and it isn't anymore. And I don't see an issue with that.
So I'm writing. So the first quality or characteristic I have right now is a being capable of producing a supernatural effect.
That's it.
That's your definition of God.
That is it.
Wow.
Everything else beyond that is something that people are pulling from religion, because it's funny because I saw a video of Aaron Ra, and he uses this one on more than one occasion. He says that for him, a god is a magical anthropomorphic immortal, and yet there are gods that are not held to be anthropomorphic. There are gods that are not held to be immortal. There are gods that are not held to be all these other qualities that people want to add on to it. And so if those qualities can't be applied universally, then they shouldn't be applied at all.
So I guess according to your definition, I mean, a space alien could be God.
Yes. Like I said, talk about the MCU Thor. He was simultaneously a god. He was a god of thunder, and he was an extraterrestrial because he was from Asgard, which is depicted as another planet. The only difference is whichever term one decided to arbitrarily assign to him. Mm-hmm. It's not that one was right and one was wrong. It's like both applied equally. It's the same thing with talking about the deity of the Abrahamic faiths. If Earth didn't exist at the time, because this being is held to have been, existed in the eternal past and created the Earth, then by default, it's also an extraterrestrial. Now, religious people are going to say, well, it's a god. This is Yahweh is a god. But someone who's not religious would probably say, no, it's an alien. Because
I think the problem is
it all comes down to whatever someone's arbitrary choice is as far as what label they like better.
I think because most people's idea or concept of God is that God has certain qualities or properties, such as being omniscient, all wise, all good. A space alien might not be those things, like a space alien could not possibly have.
That's only true, really, of the Western world, though. Like you look at the numbers of pantheons of gods throughout antiquity, whether it be the Aztecs, the Incans, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Native Americans and their the Norse gods. None of them were held to be all powerful and all knowing and all present and all loving. Like, no, they were gods who had limitations. And so when you say, well, if this God doesn't have these qualities, then it's not God. It's like, you say potato, I say potato.
Yeah.
And that's not even getting into pantheists. Pantheists say the universe is God. And so,
well, it might not be.
It comes across to me as being a sort of gatekeeping for what we're allowed to call God. No, you can use any word any way that you like to use.
All right, let's see if we can. Let me ask you if you believe in this definition of God that I usually use. I believe, so this is how I define God. I think there are at least two major characteristics of God that need to be present for it to be God. One is that it is the source of creation / reality. And that two, it is intelligent and it is aware and it acts with intentionality. So it has basically a mind. So those are my two qualities or without. So do you think such a God as that exists?
Before I answer that, I will also draw a distinction between definition and description. A definition is a statement that says what something is. A description is a statement that helps you envision it. Okay? So, for example, I think the distinction is important because, for example, let's say we're going to a parking garage, and someone says, I think there's a car inside that garage. Okay? And another person says, I think that there's a 1979 red Corvette with Goodyear tires. It's a convertible with leather interior, and it's parked in space 2G, and it has a license plate that says, I'm right. Okay. If by chance there's a pink Volkswagen bus from 1962 parked somewhere else in that garage, the first person is right because there is in fact a car in there. There's an automobile in there. The second person is wrong. The description was incorrect, but the definition was correct. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Follow that?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
with that in mind, the definition for God that I use is intentionally the broadest one that I can use. Now, if we're going to describe a specific one, then there are specific deities that I would feel like we can rule out. For example, the idea of an omniscient deity, I think, can be ruled out simply because that is paradoxical, and I've not found a way to reconcile that paradox.
Well, all right, let's stop there.
At a minimum, that being wouldn't know what it's like to learn something or to not know something. Does that make sense? Because if it knows something, you can't square that circle. I've kind of contemplated the omnipotence paradox, and I was able to kind of square that circle in that I could envision a being that is all-powerful who has a self-imposed moratorium against certain actions, in which case, because it's a self-imposed limitation, it's not really that the being isn't able to do something. It's that it's not going to do something because it has that self-imposed restriction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's not. I want to engage with the chat a little bit.
But I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to do that with the omniscience part.
Yeah, objective ethics in philosophy. In philosophy, God is merely the necessary being, and often called. Sorry, I don't know if you can. I'm reading some of the chats real fast, Kevin. So just let me take care of this one. In philosophy, God is merely the necessary being, and often called maximally great. Everything else is up for grabs. Well,
something like that, I think, is a far more viable formulation, because I think that could be defended, whereas there are certain interpretations, like I don't think that they're really defendable. This one, I think that feasible.
I think that the intelligence aspect is necessary, because otherwise, if there's no intelligence, then you really are essentially getting to just pure naturalism. Then pantheism is correct, and naturalism is the correct worldview to interpret God. So I think that the intelligence and intentionality and awareness, consciousness of God is actually something that would constitute a being that humans conceive of as God. It's not enough just to have existence. You have to have existence plus awareness of existence. So if God isn't aware, it's not God.
I would tend toward that direction myself. And that's why, as I said, you can make an argument from pantheism and say, premise one, the universe is co-equal to the divine. Premise two, the universe exists. Conclusion, therefore, a God exists. And so based on that, I could call myself Gnostic, because, I mean, it logically follows. But for my own sake, I can't bring myself to do that, because I feel like in order to say that I know that this thing exists, I need to be able to say I know more about it than that it exists. You know what I mean?
I think that
for my own comfort, I don't think that's enough. I think that, you need to have more to it than that.
I think that the problem with atheists and skeptics, and not that it's a problem like they're bad people, but their line of thinking, is that they refuse to recognize the necessity of faith. A lot of times,
I have a good one for you on this one. Let
me just kind of complete the thought.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem is they want it all to be about knowledge, which is
Mm-hmm.
a loaded, sometimes difficult to define term, and they want to ask what people know. And I've never said, or maybe I have, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I strongly believe there's a God,
Mm-hmm.
but some of that is based on faith, based on things people have said, like Jesus Christ. Like, I don't know Jesus Christ received revelation from God and was accurately representing those revelations to people. No, I don't, but I have faith. Atheists want to toss out the necessity of faith and just say, I'm only going to go by what I know. Well, if you're wrong, good luck to you. But go ahead with your thought.
So the I don't have faith thing is a complete load of crap, and it's easily demonstrable. Okay. So most of the time they're going to define faith in terms of belief sans evidence. Are we agreed on that much?
Yeah, that will.
Okay, that's the standard thing. Okay. I'm going to ask you personally. Have you ever, and then I want you to think about what anybody else's answer to this would be, if they're being honest. Have you ever conducted an inventory of absolutely every proposition that you believe, let alone then further verify that each and every one of those propositions to which you assent also has evidence to support it?
I can't say that I have.
No. So the very idea that you don't have faith paradoxically requires that you do.
Wow.
It
Yeah.
really is that simple.
I have used a variation of that argument against evolutionists. I don't believe in evolution, by the way, but one thing I'll say about evolution is that kind of that same line of argumentation, there is so much that evolutionists have been told about things that happen in evolutionary history that they just take for granted because, oh, a scientist said it. A scientist said the little dog turned into a whale. And because, they're the experts, that must mean it's true. Well, did you investigate the little dog turning into a whale yourself? Did you investigate that there's even a fossil which proves that? Did you investigate the fossil record and all of these things that you're taught? And did you, even the things that you believe, did you personally ask yourself, like, is that reasonable? And even I've asked people who are biologists, and I've made them realize that you can't possibly know a small fraction of all the facts necessary to support evolution. It's a bunch of people writing papers, none of which anyone knows the total, a fraction of the total of all of it. So evolutionists are kind of taking on faith the work of other people to support the facts that they believe contribute to the truth of evolution.
And you hit on something else that I reference in my first book, and it's the infinite regress as you demand more evidence. So you could take anything else that the person says that they know to be true, and you ask them for evidence of it, and they're going to say, well, I read such and such a study. Okay, well, how do you know that study is credible? And then they're going to provide something else, and you just keep pushing them. Well, how do you know that is credible? How do you know that? How do you know? And eventually they're going to hit on something that's not evidence. And if you're using the restrictive definition of faith as being belief sans evidence, then whatever they hit on that's not evidence, guess what? That's faith.
Yeah. The origin of the universe is another good one, too.
To it, you can assign another label, but it's faith.
Yeah. I've had a number of conversations with atheists, skeptics, whatever they call themselves. And a lot of the point of the idea of God or religion is to explain the origin of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But when I start talking about the Big Bang and how little direct, empirical, verifiable evidence for that, and yet they believe it, I basically get them to a position where they have to admit that, yeah, they have faith that there was a Big Bang, where the universe began to expand, even though the singularity was never observed.
Mm-hmm.
A singularity expanding into a universe has never been observed. There's all these things where they do have to have faith that these abiogenesis is another good area.
And I'm planning on writing a book that's going to be discussing different positions on R and Ra's positions on different things. And the crux of it is, he argues that if you can't show it, then you don't know it. Okay, that's the short version of it. If you don't have the evidence for it, then you don't know it. So, okay, based on that, I'm going to name a variety of different things that, by his standard, he does not know. And it is all going to be things that I agree that he's right. It's not that I disagree. It's that these things are their inferences, and they may even be reasonable inferences. But by your standard, not you, but by your standard, you don't know these.
Yeah.
Because you don't have evidence for them. So, like, I am of the opinion that that evolution is true. Okay. So I disagree with you on that point. And I think that a logical inference can be made to support that. But let's not kid ourselves. It is an inference. We don't know that. We can't know that because we can't observe that, because we weren't around to observe it. Yeah. And we haven't been able to duplicate it either.
Yeah. So okay, well, you're right about that.
Based upon this information that we have, we're going to take this next step. But it is ultimately an inference. And as far as abiogenesis is concerned, I find that idea to be endlessly hysterical, because whether you happen to be someone who is a creationist or not, ultimately, everyone is talking about abiogenesis. We're all talking about organic life arising from inorganic life. The only difference being that the religious side typically will say the catalyst that brought this about is insert God. And the other side is like, we don't know what it is, but obviously whatever is existed to make it happen. So the only disagreement is, what are we going to label this thing?
Yeah. I have some good videos on my channel that I think do a good job of kind of showing that there are serious problems with thinking that evolution happened, but a lot of people make that claim. Let me ask you this. We're kind of winding down a little bit. My streams, I try not to go too long. This has been a good conversation, though. Don't let me think. I'm not trying to dip out, but there's a couple things I want to get to. First of all, you say you've written some books. Do you want to plug them, or do you just want to?
Sure.
Okay.
So
yeah.
My first book, I have 3 of them here on my shelf behind me. I'll grab them off the shelf here. So, and these are all available on my website, or on my bio page of my YouTube channel. First one is Atheism Untenable. This was a more generalized narrative style where I'm arguing it doesn't matter what flavor of atheist you are. Every version of atheism, whether it be a Gnostic atheist or the hard, positive, strong, what I call propositional atheist, or the colloquial atheist who just says, I don't believe one, but I don't believe the other one either. It doesn't matter. You're bound to be making an assertion of some kind, and it may or may not be about the existence of a deity. It may be about, like I said, the assertion about human cognition. But you have to be making a claim about something, and none of those have sufficient evidence to support them. Then I have Objecting to the Absence of Belief, which is a much more scholarly, dry treatment. It's just a collection of essays that lay out the argument for why I reject the idea of a absence of belief as being intrinsically incoherent. And then I have Bogus, the intellectual dishonesty of non-belief, which is, again, more of a narrative style that talks about a variety of things and claims that I've found that atheists make. And then I don't have a copy of it currently, but my most recent book that I published is Debating Dillahunty, Transgenderism, and the Unfalsifiability of Identity. And the argument that I make there is that it is intellectually bankrupt and ethically irresponsible to not have some way to differentiate between someone who is genuinely transgender and someone who is only claiming to be transgender. And that one is one where I've been constantly poking the bear, because he had challenged me to a debate on a YouTube comment, and then he blocked me. And so I sent him a copy of this in the mail. I have commented on his YouTube channels and he blocked me. I commented on his Facebook, he blocked me. I have been tagging him on Twitter, and basically I'm saying, if you believe, or if you want to believe what is true, because he says he wants to believe as many true things and not believe as many untrue things as possible. It's like, if that is the case, then it should matter to you whether someone is what they're claiming that they are. And yet he seems to give this issue specifically a free pass and say that a person's gender is whatever they say that it is.
Yeah.
Well, no, because people lie, and we know
I think that when it comes to a large portion of the skeptic atheistic community, their hypocrisy on the transgender issue is so blaringly obvious. How they've always claimed, before this issue became kind of in the forefront of our cultural discussion, I always heard, back in the 2000s, it was always about religion denies science. It's all about feelings. It's all about feeling good. It's all about being comfortable by your fake God. And then around the middle of the 2010s, you start seeing this shift in atheism toward this radical sexual liberal ideology, with basically affirming homosexuality, even though let me just kind of bring all this out. There's nothing in atheism that basically allows you to say a person is good or bad one way or the other. But there is this movement within atheism to ally themselves with the LGBT movement to say that basically if you don't embrace this movement, you're a bad, evil person. But even within atheism, which is based on evolution, there's no basis for homosexuality. It's an evolutionary dead end to them. So why are they affirming it? Why are they supporting it? Same with transgenderism. The science is that a man is a man, is a woman is a woman, and there's obviously some exceptions with people who have genetic deformities and stuff. Nothing to make fun of, but it just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that there's a lot of people out there who have this mental condition where they're born a otherwise fully physiologically complete male or female, and they believe they're the opposite sex, and it's just basically a delusion. That's the best word I can think of it. But the atheists, like the Dillahunties, which is most atheists and skeptics, there are a few that dissent, but they have basically taken the position that, these people's feelings are more important than the fundamental observable reality we all experience, which is to say that, no, they're not what you're claiming to be. So I just think that there's a very clear and obvious hypocrisy that kind of has exposed them for anyone who wants to see it. And so that's an interesting that you brought that up.
Well, to be clear, I am of the opinion, because the book I wrote, it's like 400 some pages. Like I've done my homework. I have lots of references in it. I am of the understanding that biological sex and gender are two separate categories.
Sure.
I understand that transgender people exist. I don't deny their life experiences. I don't deny that they should have the same, be treated with the same level of respect and dignity as anybody else. I don't deny that they should have the same rights as everybody else. My issue is, how do you differentiate between a person who is genuinely a trans person from a person who is cis but claims that they are trans?
That's a good question.
And I've been tagging him with article after article after article of cases like that, where, for instance, there was a writer from, I want to say from Canada, and he was entering these poetry competitions portraying himself as an African transgender person from Ethiopia, I think, intentionally writing bad poetry just to see what kind of reaction that he would be able to get. And then I guess he came clean after the fact. And then there was the case of Clarissa Pinkston, I think was her name, was the model for Rihanna's clothing line, who had said some transphobic remarks. And then she said that she was a trans woman so that she could kind of get a free pass on that, and then increase her social media following. And then after the fact, she's like, no, I'm not actually a trans woman. The Canadian bodybuilder Avi Silverberg, who, because of this lifting organization's policy was such that they didn't question anybody, he just showed up unannounced basically to a women's weightlifting competition, broke all their records, and then left just to make the point that their policies are stupid, which they are.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
If you're upset about this person who's portraying themselves in a way that is casting the community in a bad light, and you should be upset by that, what are you going to do to stop it?
Yeah. I want to, well, go ahead. Do you have anything else to clear? No. I want to go a little bit into Christianity because I am a Christian. And, feel free to say whatever it is you want to say. I don't want to feel like you have to, because I'm a Christian, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I just kind of want to get an idea of where you're at, because I do want you to come. Go ahead. Based
upon what I've heard from you so far, because you've mentioned that a lot of your beliefs in terms of your Christianity are unorthodox, and other Christians would say that you're not Christian. You almost come across as if you're a Jesuit or a Jesuitism, or like there's three different terms that are kind of used interchangeably. And as I understand them, it was, we believe in the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And they kind of left it at that. Like all the other stuff, maybe or maybe not, but it was almost like a philosophical position rather than a religious position.
Yeah, so it's a Jesuit.
Pretty close.
Yes, actually, yeah, you're exactly right. First of all, it's not Jesuit. A Jesuit is a branch of Catholicism, and I kind of oppose the Catholic Church. It's Jesuist. I know it's real.
Yeah, that's very similar.
Close. It's right in there, but yeah, basically.
I've also heard Jesuinism and Jesusism. I think were the other terms.
Right. Some people, there's a number of terms. There's on YouTube something that's called the Jesus Words Only movement.
Mm-hmm.
Pure Jesus. Basically, yeah, it's just we look at what Jesus taught, and go by that. You're not required to believe in a literal Garden of Eden. You're not
Right.
required to believe in the canon. You don't have to believe. You don't even have to really believe that the patriarchs existed as real people. It could be, I hate to use mythology, but again, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying I believe it's mythology. I'm just saying you're basically outside of the teachings of Christ. I think that if there was a core essential, like Jesus did have to be a real person, and he really did have to have apostles that he sent around the earth to teach his teachings. Like, I don't think you can be a mythicist and a Jesuit. I think you have to believe that Jesus. I do believe Jesus was a real person.
Uh-huh.
But basically, as far as the claims of the Old Testament, I mean, we could go like line by line and say, do you have to believe this? Do you have to believe that? But basically, yeah, there's freedom. But basically, as long as you're obeying the teachings of Christ and living within them, you're within what Jesus wanted. You are basically abiding by Christ's words.
It's a Jeffersonian Christian.
Right. So you're aware of that.
Jefferson went so far as to take multiple copies of the Bible, cut out the word of Jesus, and make his own Bible that way.
Exactly. It's called the Jefferson Bible, and it was just a composition. Oh, that's interesting.
He rejected he rejected the miracles and a lot of that kind of stuff.
He did.
And I am of the opinion that if some random person came up to you on the street with these teachings, they would still have value. There's that inherent value in the teachings themselves, regardless of what the source is.
There are, but the value would be that they are ultimately true in that they correspond to some reality beyond what Christ taught. And what I try to get Christians to see is basically just a lot of them are just simply not believing what Jesus Christ taught. And the reason for that is how Christianity is presented. Christianity is wrapped up in all these other concepts like a canon and a Bible, and you have to believe all of it, and you have to believe all of it is inerrant and things like that. Whereas to me, Christianity is basically an ethics and a way of life that Jesus expounded based on his basically communication with God. Oh, that's another probably. Yeah, I do believe you have to believe Jesus actually was communicating with God. So I know that's kind of a stretch for a lot of people, but he did claim to be talking. Go ahead.
I found that a lot of times that people will gravitate to specific passages that they like and cling to those and raise those to being of greater importance while simultaneously ignoring things that they don't like.
A lot of people do that, and I think that there's great consistency. I mean, yeah, you can look at a few verses here and there, and that's what's going on here. But I think there's great consistency between basically internal consistency in the words of Christ and also Christ with the other, what I call original Testament prophets. I think it's now again because you can't totally say that there was no manipulation. There might be some, like I said, some verses where it's like, okay, clearly this looks like it might be an issue here, but for the most part, the preponderance is that basically God is commanding people. I've given you commands. And I expect you to obey them. And if you don't obey them, then I'm going to basically punish you either in the here or the hereafter. And I think that's what Christ taught. And unfortunately, that's not what a lot of Christians believe. A lot of Christians believe that Christianity is believing that Jesus died for them, that he's some sort of sacrificial atonement for their sins or something like that. And they attain salvation by just putting their faith in him.
I find the whole idea of sacrificial atonement to be hilarious. Because the question I ask is, why would an all-powerful God need a blood sacrifice?
Right.
And why would an all-loving God want one? And the answer I get, well, it's not that he needed one, it's because we needed one. It's like, now you're just arguing semantics.
Well, yeah, the problem for them is that that's the system that God set up. So why would God set it up that way?
It doesn't make any kind of sense. It's like I am far less holy, we'll say, than God is supposed to be. But not once have I ever required a blood sacrifice for one of my kids to facilitate my forgiveness of them.
Yeah,
The
right.
very idea of that is incoherent.
Well, it's not necessarily internally incoherent, but it is sort of ridiculous. And also, one of the problems with paganism is that that was their system, is that they were doing animal and human sacrifices and to their false gods. And the whole point was like, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you? This isn't something that a god would need. Oh, well, actually, it turns out, yeah, it is exactly what God needs. God needs a human sacrifice to forgive sins, according to how Christianity is taught. And it raises all kinds of theological problems,
Why?
like,
But why?
yeah,
Make it
and
make
also
sense.
it makes God unfair, an unfair judge, because basically God is going to, based on killing his own son, deem people who believe that to be righteous because they believed it, while they are inherently in and of themselves unrighteous. So God
Exactly.
becomes this kind of unfair, bloodthirsty kind of maniac, as opposed to a much more sensible God, in my opinion, which I believe, which is that God exists. God has rules, which is that we do the right thing and love one each other, and that is the basis of our judgment. And we're judged not based on what other people do, but what we do, because that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might not. You can argue it's not ultimately true, but I think it makes a whole lot more sense than what Christians are being taught in the churches.
Well,
Personally,
and like I said, I have some unorthodox views. So, like, if I were to subscribe uh, to this entity that's described in the Bible, then I would have to do it from the standpoint of, because there are verses, I can't think of what of them off the top of my head, but it describes the unquenchable fire, and it describes the unquenchable fire as being relative to hell, and it uses the exact same terminology as being in the presence of God, and how everyone is going to go, like
yeah,
the threshing. I can't think of the terms off the top of my head,
the threshing
but
floor, I
how
think.
everyone's going to be subjected to this. And that's how
Yeah,
they separate the wheat from the chaff. That was the part I was thinking of. And so the way that I would look at that is, um, so if you've ever used a massage shower head, it feels good and it relaxes your muscles and all that kind of stuff, right? But if you have a sunburn, it hurts because your
mm-hmm.
skin is. There's nothing different about the shower head. It's you that is different.
Mm.
And so for me, if I were to subscribe to this, I'd have to subscribe also to the idea that we're all going to be subjected to the same presence, and how we perceive that is going to be based upon what we've done, which
You
is not
know,
all different from what you were just saying.
you might be right. You might be right. I think that that belief could fall within a rational understanding of what Jesus taught, because Jesus didn't really give the specifics, and a lot of times he spoke in parables or symbolic generalities. So I can see how. I guess what you're kind of saying is that we will be in the same realm, all of us, everybody,
Mhm.
but how we experience that realm will be dependent on the how we've made ourselves into how
Right.
it affects our our experience.
Right. And if you subscribe to the idea of annihilation, that could also be part of the how you perceive being in this presence.
Well, I
I
do
don't
not
know that I
believe.
subscribe to that idea
Neither do
myself.
I. I do not
If
subscribe.
you do,
Yeah. Well, to me, I believe that the soul again. this is obviously unscientific, it's just kind of something more philosophical. The soul is immaterial and is eternal. Those are undefined terms. Well, I guess immaterial is kind of, they're both poorly defined, but what I will say is that I believe it is basically the same, at its essence, the same substance as God or the ultimate reality. So it can never really be extinguished. So every soul will continue through eternity, and it will never be extinguished, but it will have different experiences. So either pleasant or unpleasant. But that's we're not going to try and delve into all that. Just opened a whole other can of worms. I guess here's what we're going to do. Yeah, we're kind of running out of time. This was kind of a situation. You were the only one who joined, so I was just talking. If someone else had joined, I probably would have had to decide how I want to do it. But so
I do have two other things that I will briefly mention that might be interesting to delve into in a future.
Go ahead.
And that's that, in my estimation, directed panspermia. You know what that is?
I know that panspermia is the idea that life came from outer space.
Yeah. Okay, so directed panspermia and simulation theory, to me, are essentially theism for intellectuals with updated vocabulary.
Yeah. The multiverse too is an escape route.
Yeah.
Believing in
it's the same thing. You're changing the words, but you're essentially talking about the exact same thing.
Yeah. They recognize the unlikelihood of life, and that basically they're just trying to find a way to avoid it being a god. So there's a god, a universe generating whatever that's popping out universes, and one of them happens to be ours.
Yeah.
And they'll believe that without very much evidence, but the idea, so I get, right, it's terminology, it's language, but yeah, I agree. So what we're going to do, I think we're going to kind of close things down. No one else has joined. But that's fine, because we were having a good conversation. I was learning a lot about your ideas, and I think there's a lot of other places we could go. So I guess
we barely touched on ethics.
Yeah, we really did, but
that's a deep one by itself.
It is. There's so many deep topics, but it's going to have to be for another time. What we usually do is, if you want to have a couple final words, just to say like a minute or 2, 3 minutes to say whatever you want, and then I'll close down the stream. So yeah, if you have some final words. Good. Okay. Well, it was good talking to you, Kevin. You're obviously welcome back, and we'll explore some further thoughts. Personally, I think that Christianity, it requires faith, but when we, I'm not saying you don't, but when we look at solving the world's problems, and also the salvation of our soul, which I think everyone does have a soul, including you, Jesus' words probably speak to that. So just keep an open mind, and not that you don't, but always, if you don't, do that, and we'll have more conversations.
Absolutely. It was awesome talking to you, man.
All right, good. I'm glad you joined. Thank you so much. I hope to talk to you again. Bye. Absolutely. All right. That was an interesting conversation. I've never talked to Kevin before. I hope he comes back. We talked a lot about atheism and skepticism, the different variations, and how skeptics conceive of their non-belief. I think one thing about atheism is that one thing atheists will say is that they lack a belief in theism. They don't have the burden of proof. But what they got to realize is that if God doesn't exist, there are logical implications of that. There are there are inescapable, direct, real implications of that affect how reality operates. Namely, I'll give you one that's very clear. Everything has to have happened without reference to a divine being. So that means life had to arise without a divine being guiding the process or creating things. So if you don't believe God exists, or if God does not exist, necessarily life arose without God. How did that happen? Well, science says the earth is not eternal. It began about 4 billion years ago. So you have to get from an earth with no life on it to an earth with all the life we see on it. How did that happen without God? Evolution. So if there's no God, evolution must be true. There's no way around it. Okay, there's a big problem. evolution is mathematically impossible. I've demonstrated this on my channel before. It just can't have happened. Now, an intelligent being could have guided the process so that it would happen and kind of overcome the mathematics, just like it's highly unlikely a smartphone would arrange itself over time in the course of Earth's history, but intelligent beings could make a whole bunch of them in a very short period of time. So there's logical implications of there not being a God, and that just when you think about all the things that had to have happened without God, that must have happened. It turns out that atheism is very unlikely, and you have to understand that you can't avoid. You can say you don't believe there's evidence of a God, but you can't avoid the actuality, the reality that if there is no God, then certain other things must be true, which are highly unlikely, and therefore the God hypothesis becomes very rational. So there's things like that that atheists want to ignore, and again, I can't prove that right now, but I already just gave one example, but there's many examples like that. So an atheist, like Kevin was saying, um, as there are a lot of things that atheists do believe, like that logical implications of the belief system that are unproven, and yet they take it on faith, just like a religious person takes, the existence of Jesus or God on faith. So I think evolution and the evolution, yeah, absolutely they can. But the problem is that certain concepts of evolution can't be true, or they're very unlikely to be true. There's no reason to believe that naturalistic evolution is true based on the evidence that I've seen. I'm trying to get on it. I think I'm going to start debating this. I'm in contact with one of the larger debate channels, and I'm gonna bring this into debate calls. I might start debating some evolution, but right now I haven't confirmed that, so I probably shouldn't say that. Evolution is evidence of the devil. Not sure about that one. Do theists have positions but begging the question in personal incredulity? Um, well, I will say that there are arguments for theism that are irrational, like the tag argument. The tag argument is a horrible argument for God. The presuppositionalists have horrible arguments for God that are very circular and ridiculous, quite frankly. So, do theists have positions other than begging the question and personal incredulity? Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the intelligent design movement is actually based on real science. It's based on the idea that intelligence is a much more rational explanation for what you observe than materialistic causes, materialistic processes. Absolutely. So then the question goes, well, is the intelligence God? Well, maybe not. It might be super powerful space aliens, but it also could be God. Technical question about atavisms. Is a baby born with a tail demon possessed? Uh, humans really are not born with tails. Like, if you look at pictures of people who supposedly have tails, which I'm not recommending people do because they're actually genetic deformities. They're not like they're not like a well-shaped monkey tail at all. They're like kind of like, disfigured and stuff, and they're actually like bones structures not developing properly. If you look for someone with a tail in actual medical literature or scientific literature, you're not going to find it. So that's really not a thing. I think atavisms and what do they call them? Vestigial organs, they really don't exist in reality. Um, no, creationism is not begging the question. It's looking at the evidence before us and asking what's the best option that explains this. Is it materialistic processes, natural processes, or is it some sort of a guiding intelligence? You're looking at the possibilities and you're trying to rule one out in favor of the other. OE thinks there have been beneficial mutations. I would say there haven't been mutations that contribute to the addition of functional genetic material. I'm gonna have to disagree with you, Dirty. The problem is it depends on how you define beneficial. There are mutations that, in certain limited circumstances, do provide benefits to a creature, but they're not beneficial in the sense that of evolution that they will lead to new organisms. So I will agree with you on that. Like the types of mutations that usually result in benefits are like let's say let's say there's a creature that has heavy bones and so it can't swim, but there's a genetic mutation in one of that weakens the bone structure so their bones break more easily and thus the organism die, but they can float better. These are the kinds of so what the evolutionists say, look, it can float. This is how whales evolved from lighter bones. It's so no, it's just an organism that has a mutation that weakens its bones and it dies more easily. So it's kind of they kind of play this trick where anything that does anything beneficial at any point is beneficial, as opposed to the real definition of beneficial, which is that it actually increases the functional genetic information in an organism. Creationism is starting with no, it isn't. It's not. It's not starting with the conclusion of a creator. It's looking at the evidence before us and asking which makes more sense: intelligent creation or naturalistic processes. You can look at the evidence and think that one makes more sense than the other without starting from that position. Lactose intolerance is God's work. Drinking, well, you could say about any uh, genetic abnormality that leads to, there's Down syndrome. There's all kinds of genetic deformations. Maybe they do have a purpose in God's. Yeah, exactly. Malaria, fixed sequels. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Dirty Varmint. It's an obviously ridiculous position to take, but you hear evolutionists saying stuff like that all the time, including that exact example. There are many prominent evolutionists who say that sickle cell anemia is a beneficial mutation. It's ridiculous. It really is. It's pathetic how weak their evidence is that they have to go that route. So yes, to them, sickle cell anemia is a beneficial mutation. But then you ask them how many of them want sickle cell anemia, and I guarantee you none of them wants it because it's a horrible thing to have. It causes all kinds of problems in life, and it really reduces your reproductive fitness and horribly. But you're right. That's the kind of beneficial mutation they're talking about. All right, folks, we gotta shut it down. Look for more like and subscribe. We'll have more conversations like this. I am still scheduled to debate on Standing for Truth's channel in November, at the end of November. So be on the lookout for that. I will debating. It's a Christian channel. Name a theist that came to the conclusion. There are so many. There are so many. I mean, there's a lot of people who looked at the evidence for evolution, thought it was incredibly weak, and said, if natural processes can't do this, then maybe an intelligence makes more sense. Technically, there's no empirical evidence of a creator. Well, that's not true. There are people who claim to have seen God, but the question is, are their reports credible or not? So even Jesus could be thrown into that category. He claimed to be receiving direct evidence from God. So there are individuals who claim to have had empirical evidence. The problem is it's not demonstrable, or repeatable. But a lot of people claim to have seen God and spirits and things like that. So I don't know. For them, they do have that experience, and I think that, to me, that also is it is evidence, but it's not like absolute proof because it isn't verifiable. But it is evidence. Where was I? Oh yeah. I'm going to be debating on the Standing for Truth channel at the end of November. So that's exactly 2 months away. November 22nd. So the proposition for the debate. So this isn't going to interest the skeptics very much and the non-Christians because it is a debate within internal Christian doctrine. But the proposition is justification by faith alone? So basically, is justification by God based on one having faith alone, just believing in Christ? Or does one also have to have like good works and obey Christ's commandments and God's commandments and things like that? Which I absolutely affirm. I think people have to obey God. I think if you don't obey God's commandments, then you don't have faith in God. So obedience to God and doing good works is all necessary. You can't be unrighteous and be justified in the eyes of God. So I will be making that argument. But since the proposition itself is justification by faith alone, I will be arguing the negative, and thus I will be going second. Claims not, well, they are empirical for those people. If you witness something, for you that is empirical evidence, but it's not for everybody else. So if somebody comes running out of the woods, objective ethics, and they say, I saw a bear and it's coming this way, you don't have proof of that bear. But that person, might have seen a bear. And to that person does have empirical evidence of a bear because he or she saw the bear. Now, when someone claims to see a bear, you have two choices. You can either believe them or not believe them until you've seen the bear yourself. So in the case of religion, you have a bunch of people in history who said, I've seen God or I've seen this or that. And everyone else has the option. Do I put my faith in this person or do I not? But for those people who've seen a bear, that is empirical evidence. Just because everyone hasn't seen the evidence doesn't mean there's no evidence. All right. Like and subscribe. Come back. Hopefully, only Kevin joined the conversation. Maybe next time, more people will join or we'll have a more open discussion. I did say I kind of wanted to limit it, so maybe that's why. But yeah, we should have more conversations like this. All right. God bless. Goodbye.